You led us to this point where several years after you've been raped by your first boyfriend, having lived with disconnection, and you talk in the book about really just, dealing with that trauma in some very unhealthy ways and shutting down and just doing the things that humans do to survive something so dislocating and painful as being raped. And then you reached out to him. What on earth triggered you to try and make contact with this man that had hurt you so much?
Right. It's such a good question. But it brings me back to what I was saying earlier about the disconnect I felt inside and how it was propelling me to unhealthy patterns, such as working way too much, just piling on things so I'd never have to stand still, because standing still was dangerous, because then this inner dialogue would start. And also abusing food, abusing alcohol, abusing essentially things that could numb the way I was feeling. And disconnect is what I believe the source is to be the source of all suffering in the world. It is when we're disconnected from ourselves or others that we can inflict pain. Certainly that's true for what my first boyfriend, Tom, did to me. He was disconnected from values that he only discovered later he holds sacred, such as the basic respect he should have had for my boundaries and my bodily autonomy and my human rights, essentially. So, it was that disconnect that I felt inside that I thought, I can't live this way. I am going to fall apart unless I find a way to heal from this. And I realized that the first thing that needed to happen on that journey was to just return the shame to its rightful owner. Like, this is not my burden to carry, this is not something I should have to weigh myself down with for the rest of my life. If we look at life as a journey, like if we're all on this path, we're all on different paths, but we're walking towards a destination, then we don't want to fill our pockets with rocks or like unnecessary weight. We'd find ways to leave them, by the side of the road. And I'd come to that point in my journey where I was like, I'm not going to carry this weight anymore. So I reached out and I essentially just confronted Tom with what he'd done, not thinking he would take it on. I thought he might shut me out, he might deny it, but he ended up very graciously and full of regret opening his arms to this responsibility, and it ended up being a saving grace for him too. I don't think he would be alive today if he hadn't also stopped and quit trying to outrun the dark deed he had committed all those years ago, because it was taking the same kind of toll on him. And that is one of the remarkable discoveries of this journey, is that we were living parallel lives. He, because he was trying to outrun a very justified shame and responsibility that belonged to him and him alone. And me, because I don't live in a vacuum. I was raised in a society that does tend to blame victims, and I'd taken on a lot of that victim blaming ideology along the way. When we stopped and looked the past in the eye in each other, this exchange started to unfold. Correspondence to begin with that lasted 8 years, where we delved into the consequences of that night, how it had impacted our lives. And that was a fascinating analysis that I think was deeply healing for both of us, essentially. And I would never have done that if I didn't sense a deep longing in him to make things up to me and to be there for me in a way that would help me heal from what he'd done. And so I decided to embark on that dialogue, thinking there could be things in here that are useful for me, and things that I might even be able to pass on in the form of knowledge, because I've worked with this cause and with survivors of violence for 2 decades now. So yeah, that's, I think, what led me to not just leaning into this, but actually yearning it and being mended by it. And that is not to say that I wasn't angry. That is not to say that I didn't, want to make him squirm, which I think is a natural and necessary way to react when someone does you wrong. So I do think that there's a place for anger, and it's absolutely vital. But for me, it's sort of vaporized when I sat in this space, in this conversation with a man that was essentially punishing himself far more effectively than I could have. So it became, in a way, almost self-indulgent to hold on to the anger and the hurt and the hate, because it wasn't serving me anymore, and it wasn't leading to anything constructive. So little by little, I realized the way for me to set myself free is to take back this energy that has been spent on invested, if you will, in these negative emotions, and reinvest that in myself and things that serve me better. So it was a long journey, and it did have all these chapters that each served a purpose. But it ended up in a place of peace, where forgiveness came quite effortlessly as a natural result of all the previous steps on that journey.